Late Night Health continues. I'm Mark Alyn, along with our in-studio co-host, Gary Stuart.
Thank you very much.
And we also have Darrell Wayne, of course.
Yes,
fabulous. Keeping us on track.
Yes.
I'm doing my damnedest.
Yeah, I know. That's what you should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Feeding the train.
Feeding the train. Here we go. Gary, let's talk about emotions. I mean, people get angry, for example.
Yes, absolutely.
Standing in a supermarket line.
Mm-hmm.
I was at a store the other day, and there was a 20-minute wait to
and that
check
was
out.
Express.
Yeah, and that was Express. They had nobody else
I know.
checking out.
Mm-hmm.
One person, and there must have been 15 people in line, and of course I was number 12.
Right, exactly.
I had one item. Anger and things like that, does that affect the Constellation Healing?
Yeah, and it would be. I mean, a grocery line is not as traumatic as somebody being murdered in your family history, which of course is a lot more traumatic. But Constellation differs in most modalities that we include the perpetrator energy, because there's a perpetrator-victim cycle that a lot of people are stuck in emotionally, and they can't get out of that loop. So the goal of our modality, known as Constellations, is to disengage them from the dysfunctional loop of perpetrator and victim so that they can be released from it. And I was working with somebody yesterday, and it was giving the burden. So, generally, the victim carries the guilt or shame from the perpetrator on top of their own issues about being victimized. So what we commonly do is give the guilt and shame back to the perpetrator so you can really be free of it and let it be in your past, so you're not carrying the resentment, the guilt or shame into your future. So we want the past to be done, and for the person who was victimized once not to stay victimized, even if it's 30, 40, 50 years ago, but to walk away from it free.
Is there a repetition within one's life?
Absolutely. I see like a projection. It's almost like people are looking. It's going to sound bizarre to say, but sometimes dysfunction becomes a comfort zone. Everyone's used to it. A family's used to having inexplicable grief, known as depression sometimes, and that becomes a comfort zone in the family. They don't know any other way to be. So then what we find is there's almost a guilt not to be loyal to the family. We all suffer in this way, so to be part of this family, we have to suffer in the same way. And that gets repeated over and over. So they'll look for boogeymen or whatever they need to stay in that loop, and they'll actually create it unconsciously in the present to actually mirror what happened in the past with the ancestors. We try to break that loop as well so there can be a new day. Because I always tell people, remember, your ancestors didn't want to suffer like that. They were forced into it by a Nazi regime or a famine or whatever trauma, a sinking ship, a heart attack, whatever it was. They didn't want that to happen, but it did, so they reacted to it. So we want to leave that reaction in the past so the client now can be fully present with love and compassion in their heart as they move forward to create a new reality. And the cosmic irony is that's what those ancestors wanted too.
We talked about this. We were having coffee before the show.
Yes.
And you said that when you first heard about this, you thought it was a little woo-woo?
A little bit, until I experienced it, and I was in the role of a Lithuanian great-grandfather who had to die in about 1860. So what's amazing about this work, when we represent someone in someone's family system, we don't know if we're living or dead, and everyone who's been in a role, not knowing they represented dead people, feels as alive and conscious as they do right now in physical reality. So it's amazing to get those messages from the other side instantaneously. That in and of itself heals a lot of grief with people who have lost parents or siblings or whatever.
And have you encountered people who say this is ridiculous, this is religious? No,
it's not religious at all. It's
not.
More, you could call it more quantum physics, like everything exists simultaneously. And, I think all religions are fine, but there's a lot of trauma around religions, and we work with that quite frequently. But the bigger thing is it's about conscious. It's about being more conscious or less conscious, and that includes everything. So I view consciousness as limitless, and that's the place we go with it.
So you can go back to 1860.
Absolutely. It shows up. Sometimes it shows up. That's how long the trauma started. Yeah. We've been back to the Middle Ages, and yeah, it was so funny. Somebody had a direct descendant in Wales with, I think it was Queen Bedocia or something like that. And the rep had just come back from Wales, so she knew the whole story, unbeknownst to anyone. So she's like, oh, am I this queen? And it was about her finding people to attack her in life now, which is what that queen went through. They killed all the men and kept attacking and humiliating this queen, who's a direct descendant of the client now. So she's been people have been fighting her and attacking her in her current workplace, which is a repetition of what happened to her core ancestor back in Wales in the 10th century, 11th century. It's just the patterns repeat, even though it's a different generation.
I've been a helper, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
Right?
And you call it a rep, a client rep.
A client rep. And it's interesting that you get these images and these feelings, and at the same time you're helping people.
Absolutely.
Well, Gary, thank you for joining us today. You're going to hang
wonderful.
in here.
Absolutely. It's
right?
a wonderful show, yes.
Thank you. We appreciate it. If you want information, go to constellationswithgarystewart.com, constellationswithgarystewart.com, or visit latenighthealth.com. Look under our guests and you'll find out more information about Gary. All right, coming up, another friend of Gary's.
Oh, fantastic.
MJ Holtz will be joining us
wonderful.
about thermal imaging as we wind down our second hour here on Late Night Health. All right, Gary and I and Daryl return. Don't go away. More coming up.